Thank you. Our New Jerusalem choir has lifted up a beautiful praise and lifted our thanksgiving to our Father God. And also, our Teleo Orchestra group, as well as the youth, has finally debuted today to praise our Father. Our middle schoolers and even the elementary school students have diligently practiced their instruments, and today they have formed the youth orchestra. It hasn't even been that long since they've practiced, and yet their skill is already at this level. So let's glorify God at this time. Today is Thanksgiving Sunday, and to God, all of the things that we give to God, it's not just small thanksgiving, but they must be overflowing thanksgiving. In Colossians chapter 2 verse 7, it says to be established in your faith just as you were instructed and overflowing with gratitude. If you pour water into a cup, if the cup is full, then more water would cause it to overflow, and the overflowing water would flow to the sides. In the same way, thanksgiving must be overflowing from our hearts. Then that thanksgiving flows unto those around us. When I'm full of thanksgiving and I become this vessel of thanksgiving, then the families that are next to me, they experience that thanksgiving. Normally in their heart there might be anger or irritation, but because that thanksgiving flows unto them, it'll change. So all of you, you must have your thanksgiving overflowing. You must be messengers of thanksgiving. If you plant a flower and then you say thank you, I love you, and you continue to bless the plant, then it'll grow very straight and it'll bloom into wonderful flowers. But let's say there's another plant and you say, you rotten fool, you worthless thing, you ugly thing, then the plant will grow very crooked. And they are unable to bear flowers, and the plant itself is just crooked at all times. When we're overflowing with gratitude, you'll become healthy. Your families will become healthy, and all the things you do will go well. But on the other hand, when you always express anger, frustration, irritation, then starting from you yourself, your body will become sick, and it becomes a time in which difficulty enters your family. In one word, thanksgiving is the will of God. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 18, it says, "In everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." This is what it says. Thanksgiving is God's will. When we sincerely come before God in thanksgiving, then we are becoming those who obey the will of God. So the fruit of gratitude is obedience. To those that say that they're thankful to God but they don't obey, then that is a false gratitude. Isaac, he always lived a life full of the fruit of gratitude through obedience. Today, I want to talk about how Isaac lived, and I want to talk about what kind of thanksgiving Isaac had. Firstly, Isaac's obedience was an obedience that overflowed with gratitude, even in the midst of continuous failure. Even in the midst of continuous failure, he was always thankful. When we fail once, and we try again, and the second time it fails, and we try again, And let's say it fails again. If you continue to fail within your heart, the thanksgiving shrinks and it changes into frustration and complainings and grumblings. Ah, there's nothing that I can do. I'm such a miserable and failure. There, there's no one, not even one person that helps me or aids me, and we blame others. Firstly, Isaac, he failed in Bir Laharoi, where he was living. Isaac was living in Bir Laharoi after his father Abraham died. This is in Genesis chapter 25, verse 11. It came about after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac lived by Bir Laharoi. And this Bir Laharoi in the beginning, it was a great land that received the blessing of God, and they were living very well. But all of a sudden, there was a great famine in the land. When Abraham was alive, Abraham actually had to go to Egypt. But now that same famine has come upon the land. And if Bir Laharoi used to have a lot of food, then there'd be no need to move, right? But even in Bir Laharoi, there was a great famine and there's nothing to eat. And so Isaac went to Gerar. Secondly, before going to Gerar, Isaac went toward Beersheba. And the reason for this is because if you want to go to Gerar, at the time, the best route to it is the route towards Beersheba. And so Isaac went towards Beersheba, and then if he continued on this path, then he'd eventually get to Gerar. Through this great famine, if in the beginning Isaac decided to go to Egypt, then he wouldn't have gone towards Beersheba or Gerar. And the reason for this is because Bir Laharoi, you have to take the way of Shur to go to Egypt. It's an entirely different road that goes towards the south. You know, long ago when Abraham went when he was in between Bethel and Ai, and he went south, he went towards this way of Shur to go into Egypt. However, rather than going to Egypt, Isaac thought that I should go to Beersheba, the place where I was born, my hometown. Maybe there's something to eat in my hometown. Maybe the famine is a little less in my hometown. And with this in mind, he went upwards towards Beersheba. But as he goes to Beersheba, he finds that even in this place, there was a great famine. And now only Gerar I can place my hope in. And so he continues through Beersheba and goes to Gerar. Beersheba, or Gerar, is a place where it's very flat. There's a lot of plains. So it's really good for livestock. So Isaac's thinking, if I go to Gerar, then there'd probably be things to eat. And he continues in this way. If you look in Genesis chapter 26, verse 1, it says that the famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham existed. And so this is why he went to Gerar. But he got to Gerar, and even in this place, there was a great famine. It was a place that farming was so abundant. But and yet even in this place, because of the famine, there's not a single thing to eat. And so in Isaac's heart, ah, there's a famine in Bir Laharoy. I came towards Beersheba. There's also a famine there. Finally, I came to Gerar, my final hope. And even in this place, there's a famine. So there's nowhere to go at this point. Now Egypt is the only place that I can go. If Isaac went towards the coastal road from Gerar, then he would arrive to Egypt. It's the best route from Gerar to Egypt. If you look at Exodus chapter 13, verse 13, verse 17, it says that by way of the coast, of way of the sea. And so Isaac is now thinking to himself, now I too must leave the land of Canaan. Long ago, my father Abraham went to Egypt. I think now I too need to go. But in Genesis chapter 26, verse 2, God appeared to Isaac and he said, Isaac, don't ever go down to Egypt. Stay in the land of which I will tell you. This was God's command. Today, if it were us, can we obey God's command of not going down to Egypt? A great famine is much different. Each and every day, there's nothing to eat. Nothing. Today, you stand here, right? You sit here. But if you were plagued with the worry of what to eat, and you're on the cusp of death, how can I live tomorrow? There's no one here that sits that way, right? We all have something to eat. A great famine, it's a time in which you have to think about your current state of survival because there's nothing to eat. You know, once every few years the famine comes. But it's a famine during the time of Abraham, right? But Abraham's now dead. So Abraham was alive here in the land during 76 and he died at 175. So this famine continued to occur, right? So then why would the Bible record it as there was a famine in the times of Abraham and a famine in the times of Isaac? This is not a famine that came up every 2 or 3 years. This was a famine that came every 100 years, if not maybe. So the first person that experienced this was Abraham. And roughly 100 years later, the person that experienced this great famine is Isaac. And so his stomach is so empty. Isaac thinks, I need to go to Egypt. The Nile River flows in Egypt. There's life between the rivers. But God said, don't go to Egypt. If it were us, hey God, I'm about to starve to death right now. Why are you telling me to not go to Egypt? Are you telling me to stay here where there's nothing? This is also the land of the Philistines. What am I to do here in a Gentile land? This is a common response. But God said, don't go to Egypt. Genesis chapter 26, verse 2. If you look at verses 3, 4, and 5, for 3 verses, God says, I will bless you if you obey me, and I will be with you. And then in Genesis chapter 26, verse 6, in verse 5, actually, it says, because Abraham, your father, obeyed me and kept my charge, then you also need to do the same thing. And in Genesis chapter 26, verse 6, it says, so Isaac lived in Gerar. If you look at the original Hebrew, it is connected, it begins with the Hebrew va consecutive. And what this means is that as soon as God gave the command to not go to Egypt, and he lists all the blessings of obedience, and as soon as Isaac hears those blessings, in verse 6, immediately he obeys. If it were us, would we immediately obey? We'd ask God, why can't I go? What am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to starve to death? Isaac, even amidst continuous failure, Isaac always had a heart of thanksgiving to God. He never lost this heart. And thus, he was able to have the fruit of immediate obedience. Everyone, without thanksgiving, you cannot obey God. And yet to those who are overflowing with gratitude, even if they are continuously failing, they will always be thankful. Bir Laharoy he failed, Bir Sheba he failed, Gerar also Isaac was failing. And yet still, within his heart, he always had a heart of thanksgiving towards God. And because that did not become disconnected, Isaac was able to immediately obey. Beloved saints, do not think, how everything that I do is a failure. I always fail. Do not fall into this sadness or anxiety or despair, but only obey God before his word, and do not live or do not forget thanksgiving. And in the same way that God gave to Isaac a hundredfold blessing, he will give the same blessing to you. Today, even amidst continuous failure, may you continue to express thanksgiving, and may you become those who receive God's 100-fold blessing. And this I bless you in the name of the Lord. Secondly, Isaac's obedience was an obedience that overflowed with gratitude, even in the midst of various fears. Isaac, what kind of fears did he have? Firstly, Isaac had the fear of survival, eating. If God had told us to stay in Gerar, stay in the land of which I tell you, and as soon as Isaac obeys, we say that God blessed him 100-fold, right? This is all we know. But if you read the Bible carefully, God says, stay in Gerar, right? But from the next day, he did not receive the 100-fold blessing. You see, God, almost for a year, nothing happened in Isaac's life. Isaac obeyed, and he endured and persevered. And then God gave him that 100-fold blessing. Genesis chapter 26, verse 8. It says it came about when he had been there a long time. It says it here, right? Isaac stayed in Gerar for a long time. God commanded him to stay there, and after he obeyed, Isaac had to stay there in that state for a long time. And then he was able to plant the seed. You know, in Korea, if you have a frozen field, are you going to scatter your seed there? It won't grow. There's a time when you scatter your seed, right? God told Isaac to stay in Gerar, but he couldn't even plant anything. So until he was able to plant the seed, he had to wait many, many months. He had to think and worry many, many months. And he spread the seed. If you plant the seed, is the plant going to sprout tomorrow? No. If you plant it in spring, then in fall you have to harvest, right? It takes months. And yet, Isaac, he obeyed God's command to stay here. He stayed there for a long time. He planted the seed and he waited many months for the seed to blossom. For almost a year, when he had to wait for all those months, each and every day, how difficult must it have been for him to eat? And on top of that, is Isaac alone? At this time, Jacob and Esau were already born. So he has two sons. He also has his wife Rebecca. He has to feed all of them. Imagine how difficult it must have been. And so, within Isaac, he was always having this fear of survival. Secondly, Isaac had the fear of his wife being taken away in a Gentile land and the fear that he himself might be killed. You know, he was in Gerar, and the people of Gerar, he says, "Hey, Isaac, who's that woman?" "Oh, Rebecca was very beautiful. She's a very pretty woman." And so they say, "Hey, Isaac, who is that?" Oh, he should have said it's his wife, or he could have said that, right? But in his heart, he thought that if he said that she was his wife, then they're going to kill him to take her. He had that fear. And so he was unable to say that she's his wife, and he said, "Oh, she's my younger sister. She's my sister." Genesis chapter 26, verse 7. When the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." For he was afraid to say, "She is my wife," thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful. So he was afraid of this. This kind of fear was in his heart. And yet, God, what did he promise to him? If you look in Genesis chapter 26, verse 3, it says, "Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you." If you stay in this place, I will be with you and bless you. God promised this. Oh, God said he's going to be with me. He said he's going to bless me. Then, that God, would he leave Isaac to die? Would he let Isaac's wife be taken from him? God surely said he'd be with him. Just if Isaac had believed that God's presence would be with him, then Isaac would not have had this fear of saying that Rebekah is his wife. And so what do we call this? It's a worthless fear, useless fear, trivial fear. Beloved saints, why do you fear worthlessly? There's no reason to fear. In your heart, do not keep fear or anxiety, sadness. If God has said, "Hey, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to bless you," just stay here. When he says this, if we truly believe it, then within our heart there shouldn't be any fear or anxiety. But we don't do this, right? We keep these worthless fears in our heart. Beloved saints, and yet God had blessed Isaac. And why? Why did he do so? Even though Isaac had these humanistic fears, he was anxious, he was afraid. But even still, until the very end, he only held on to God. And it's because he did not lose his thankful heart towards God. He didn't lose his thanksgiving. In Genesis chapter 26, verse 12, now Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. And the Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and continued to grow richer until he became very wealthy. How was Isaac able to not lose his thanksgiving and hold on to God? Isaac received blessings in Gerar. He moved back to Beersheba. If you look in Genesis chapter 26, verse 23, it says later he moved back to Beersheba. In Genesis chapter 26, look at verse 28. They said, we see plainly that the Lord has been with you. And then in verse 23, then he went up from there to Beersheba, right? And this means that he moved to Beersheba from Gerar. So he moved to Beersheba. And at the time, the king of the Philistines, Abimelech, went there with his friend Ahuzath and Phicol, his commander. And they came to him and they confessed amazing things. Firstly, they testified that they had clearly seen that the Lord was with Isaac. Genesis chapter 26, verse 28. We see clearly that the Lord has been with you. Secondly, they testified that Isaac was the blessed of the Lord. So now that we know that you're blessed, don't do us any harm. This is in Genesis chapter 26, verse 29. That you will do us no harm. And then towards the end, he says, you are now the blessed of the Lord. These are people persecuting Isaac. And the king of the Philistines, Abimelech and Ahuzath and Phicol, they go to Beersheba. They go to find him. And then they say, Isaac, God is with you. We've seen it with our own eyes. And also, he says, God is with you clearly. So please, don't do us any harm. This is an amazing thing. Before that, Isaac was the one who was afraid of the land of the Philistines. He was afraid of them killing him. They were afraid of them taking his wife. He was living in this fear in a Gentile land. You know, it's like a stray dog had come into their house, and so they mistreated it. So Isaac felt like that. Imagine how hard and difficult it must have been. And yet, Isaac received 100-fold blessing. They've witnessed that God is with him. They've witnessed that God blessed him. And they acknowledged this. And so they began to fear God. Said, God, so Isaac, please do not harm us. It's a total flip of the situation. Today, we can't go into the church. And in the beginning, how afraid were we? We were anxious. And we didn't know what was going on. And yet, God is with us. And when we receive the blessings of God, then it will all be reversed. So those who make us uncomfortable and cause us to fear, all those people, in reverse, they will go to us and beg for us to save them and to not harm them. You know, I truly believe that this kind of a day will come in our lives. And so don't ever be afraid of what to eat, or do not be afraid of being harmed. Just obey the word until the very end. Keep your hearts of thanksgiving and live a life of faith before God. And so God will cause all of our property to be recovered. And in reverse, those that have been persecuting us will come and bow and ask us to not harm them. This great work will take place in your lives of faith. And are all of our saints on the side of the word. And this I bless you in the name of the Lord. In conclusion, when gratitude overflows, God takes responsibility for everything. It's time to finally reap the harvest. For many, many months, Isaac was in the land of Gerar, and he finally plants the seed. But Isaac was a shepherd, right? He doesn't know how to farm. He doesn't know anything about agriculture. So he asks the people around. And then he just throws the seed into the ground. If you look in Genesis chapter 26, verse 12, it says Isaac planted crops. In Hebrew, it's zarah, and it means to sow seed. It doesn't mean to sow seed and then water and then take care of it and take out the weeds and to take care of the plant as it grows. It's not that. It literally means to just throw the seed in. Isaac didn't know how agriculture worked, how farming worked. So all he did was plant seed. And yet still, God allowed the seed to take root. He's allowed it to bloom and blossom. And only to that one specific area, he allowed the rain to come in. Only that specific area, he allowed the sun to shine. And then, all Isaac did was throw seed into the ground, and he reaped a hundredfold blessing. This is the kind of responsibility that God takes when we just believe in him. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 2, it says, all these blessings will come upon you and overtake you if you obey the Lord your God. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. You know, in Germany, there was a person that went on a business trip. And long ago, someone took one of his shoes. And he asked the owner of the building, you know, what happened. And the owner gave him his old slippers, you know, just to wear for those at least. And he said, today I'm going to church, come with me. And so to the person that lost all his slippers, he borrowed the slippers, and then he followed the person to church. And so he worshiped there, and the person next to him was praying so earnestly. He was praising so passionately, and he was always saying, thank you, thank you. And so the slipper person said, wow, this is an amazing person. And he looked more carefully. He found out that the person was a handicap. He had no feet. And yet he was praising God and thanking God. So the slipper person says, I was complaining that I lost my shoes. And I was complaining and grumbling. But this person, he doesn't even have feet to put shoes on. And yet he's thanking God so much. And so he sincerely repented and came to awaken. someone that is above me and lives better, don't look at them. Look at the people who are living in poverty. Then you will be thankful. My car, it's a morning, it's a small compact car. What a useless car. But ride the subway. A long time ago there are these pushmen, and they are part-time workers, and their job was to push people into the train. And when they're in the train, they're just cramped and they can't even move. After writing that, you get off and say, "Oh, I'm kind of glad that I have my small car." After having this small compact car, but then riding the cramped subway, they became thankful. All the things we have now, there are so many more people that are living in poverty and in so much stress and hardship. And yet, like Isaac, we don't have to worry about survival. Like Isaac, we don't have to worry about someone killing me and taking my wife. We are living happy lives. Isaac was continuously failing. He was amidst fear, and yet he always obeyed God, and he always thanked God, and he received that hundredfold blessing. And in the same way, all of you must persevere until the very end. And in the same way that he just scattered the seed and reaped the harvest, you too, we too, we will enter into the church. It will be recovered, and the word of the history of redemption will be recovered. And I pray that that day may come swiftly. And this I bless you in the name of the Lord. At this time, let us have a time.